finally come to the end, conclusion to the last chapter of Job. And even though we have finished reading all 42 chapters, well, at least I have, I think. I don't know if you have, but I sort of condensed everything so it will allow you to speed reading. Our lives are still ongoing, still continuing on. But it also makes this next question I'm going to ask you very significant. What was your expectation this morning, or each day when you wake up? What is your expectation each morning you wake up? Maybe this morning. What is your routine when you wake up in the morning? What's your idea? What thoughts appear into your head each morning when you wake up? And I think that the expectation we have for each day when we wake up is we can approach the day with excitement or dread. Maybe you have a party coming up. Maybe you have a celebration. Maybe you have a dinner appointment or whatever. Or maybe you wake up after sleeping late the whole summer and tomorrow, the first day of school.
One more day.
Or for me, finally, I get some work done. I don't need to babysit in summer. But, yeah, can we get that recording off in case I lost yours that, okay? But if you sort of go to that next level of what is your expectation each morning when you wake up, what is the expectation of a Christ follower each morning when we wake up? What should we as Christ followers consider as standard, typical Christian life? And again, whether or not you have a mindset of happiness or unhappy or dread, really defines your routine of how you see God, how you see your life, how you see your family, everything. And I'm going to give you something radical. I think we, as Christ followers, should have sort of expectation of our lives through the book of Job. Now you think like, wow, that's crazy. But why would you ask people to look at life, how they see themselves, how they interact with one another, how they see the world through the book of Job? It's extremes, but it's true. Because, as we've been journeying through Job since January to now, I think Job paints this beautiful and very vivid picture of how God treats his people, and specifically how he treats a completely innocent believer. And I think the challenge of me as I've been studying and preparing my message for Job is sort of, I would say, is because the expectation of what it means to be a Christ follower. And if our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ suffered, and he is our master, like, wouldn't we, as his followers, be treated less? Like, why would, if Jesus died on the cross, suffered, why should we suffer less? It sort of jogs challenges my thinking. And last Sunday, we ended with Job responding to God, and we learned he was comforted. He was comforted because he saw God for who he really is. And throughout God's lesson, he was humbled, and he understood his humility, but also he experienced God in a way that he has never had. But before we dive into that, God needs to do some house cleaning. And I read them, it sounds very mean, like house cleaning. But God hasn't forgotten about his three friends. And before Job could be restored to what he's lost and the blessings that we'll dive into this morning, there is this matter that needs to be resolved. So in order for God's anger towards Job's friends to sort of dissipate, to go down a little bit, in verses 8 and 9, we see that Job must make sacrifices for them and intercede on their behalf in verses 8 and 9. And we've just sort of been repeating what I'm saying, Job's friends have given a lot of false accusations about God. And it's caused God to be really angry. And how angry? Usually in traditions, if you need to reconcile with God or to atonement, you usually have to sacrifice one animal. But these guys had to do 7. So, again, what did they do wrong? Like, what happened to them? Why did they need not 1, but 7 sacrifices? And, we've sort of been learning that, when most Christ followers go through difficult times, they go to the book of Job. And they believe that God allows bad things to happen for various reasons. And Job's friends have been sort of showing this theology to Job, and all through as we read through Job, and mentioned by Nick often, even by us. And they believe they know God's the good punishment for us when we sin, but then ultimately He blesses us as we overcome our struggles. But verse 7 puts the end to all this nonsense. So in essence, verse 7 is saying, I'm not responsible for what has happened to Job. Is that what God is saying in verse 7? Job's friend has not spoken what is true about God, and it was not sin that brought on Job's problems. And Job's friends were so set on their beliefs. Job, you suffer because you screwed up and you disappointed God. And again, there is good because they were trying to give a reason for why Job was suffering. So I put a context, and he said, you lack godly behavior. But it's a reminder how we speak to others, especially matters deeply to God. How do we speak to each other? Even, as a pastor, like when I deal with tragedy, like do I throw a Bible verse, or do I really listen and feel for the person whose heart is broken or going through difficult times? And those of us who are facing Job-like ordeals and hurtful words from other Christians, I think we can find comfort in verse 7. In essence, verse 7 and 8 warn against giving advice that can cause more harm to those who suffer. Caution us not to overestimate or try to fix our friends or fix the people that are speaking to us. Because in essence, sometimes it really worsens. It makes the situation a lot worse. And in this too rigid system that we have, in basically seeing, let's say, someone who's drunk, passed out on the street, puking, and instantly call a person, what a terrible sinner you are. And instead, we need to ask, how did this person end up like this? Or assume a prostitute is a bad person and lacks no morals. Instead of thinking, how did this individual end up this way? Maybe this person was exploited, or maybe this person was forced into this profession. And sometimes a lot of people have this religious mindset that they're very meticulous about how to follow every detail of the Bible. The law is just like the Levite and the priest in Good Samaritan parable, who are so afraid of getting impure by helping wounded men. But in contrast, the Samaritan is motivated by compassion to lend a hand. So again, what did Job get right? 3 things. First, he knew he was not guilty of sin, so he maintained his innocence. Second, Job sought in gaining trust even when God was silent. And third, Job repented, where he was guilty, trying to justify himself before God. So God instructed Job's 3 friends to come to him, and they offered burnt offerings, and God instructed Job to pray for his 3 friends, which is part of repentance in verse 8. And through prayer, Job pleaded for forgiveness for his friends, and God responded to Job's prayer. And after all these efforts to proclaim how right they were, in saying it was God who hit Job with such great problems through his life, they're humble. They're finally humble. So they submit themselves to Job and took true humility. And I truly believe that this concept of humility, that the three, fourth, Job, or takes place often. And I think within our modern church, we need to embrace this. Because, unfortunately, a lot of people who've been Christ followers for a very long time, the so-called veterans, put themselves above others. Like, I'm better. And this is something I constantly pray for myself each morning in my devotions. I need to embrace humility. I need to embrace that God placed me here to do something, but it was not because of me, it's because of Him. And you've probably heard of ministers, people within leadership, who sort of cite their credentials, saying that I have this whole alphabet soup behind my name, I went and did this, I did all this, which says, I'm better than you. But it's also interesting that I see in verses 7 and 8 that God did not require the same repentance from Job as He did the three friends. And I believe this is very similar to David in the book of Psalms, where David could offer sacrifices. David offered sacrifices, but God truly wanted David to repent and turn from his evil ways. And then later on, as we journey into the second section of chapter 42, it is broken into three sections. And in verse 10 to 12, in verses 10 to 11, after Job has prayed for his friends, God has restored what he's lost and also doubled it. And if you notice, God did not take anything away from Job in order to give it back to him later. That's not God. That's not the God that we worship. And Job had been so focused on himself all through the trouble. But after God speaking into Job's life, he repented. And I see this as a way of opening the door for God to be able to bless Job with twice as much as he was offered, as he had before. And Job's action brought on this blessing. But it's very important that he had to listen and respond to God before that door was opened. And what I see is the enemy meant for evil, this suffering for Job. But God uses all that for good, for Job's good. And it's sometimes people might think that when we do these kind of things as Christ followers, non-believers say that you're doing intellectual suicide. But I think as Christ followers, we truly have the conviction that God will always do good for His children. God was good to restore Job's wealth, even though Job never asked for it. And I see this in Job's agony, rooted in more of a spiritual aspect than this material aspect. Yet, once the spiritual was resolved, God restored the material. And after Job's prayer to his friends, his relationship was restored. And I see this restoration can only be achieved if Job and his three friends could not be achieved if they continued to have a strained relationship and was bitter. Nightmare is over. The past is now in the past. And Job's family stepped up and comforted him. Something his friends couldn't do. And then all Job's brothers, sisters, his former acquaintances, business partners, whatever, came to Job's home and dined with him. Now, do you see a difference when they came to Job as compared to these three friends? What was different? All his brothers and sisters, his former business partners, everyone came to his home and dined with him. What did they do differently? They mentored Job. They respected him. and gave him financial aid to restore his material loss. There was no lecture. How do we respond when we deal with tragedy, when we're walking with some tragedy? Do we lecture those individuals? Do we say, God has a plan for you? Do we say, well, you screwed up because of this? So it says Job's families helped Job in very practical way. I'm not preaching at him. And they continue to console him, give a pat on the back, shoulder cry on. And we understand, if Job still feels pain for his losses, but he required human comfort, despite being set right. Verse 11 says, concerning all the adversity Lord brought upon him, they brought him gifts of silver and gold and earrings. And then in verse 12, the Lord blessed the last part of Job's life more than the first. The tallying of the livestock Job obtained. And this statement of getting everything in verse 12, everything is lost, is so impactful. Because when we started our journey with Job, we've seen a man who was both godly and fortunate. But at the end, we see a man who is more blessed and more godly than before. And then we move in verse 13. Job is blessed with 10 more children, 7 sons and 3 daughters. And I find it very interesting. If you look at verse 14. And 13, 14. 7 sons and 3 daughters. I don't see the names of the sons. Why does the author write about the names of the 3 daughters? So I got into it. What? There must be a reason, because I truly believe that names are not random. You don't see any Bob or Pierce or whatever, these common names. Like, I really believe that there's a name. Names have a meaning. And I see these 3 names showing inherent beauty in how Job's life is blessed again. The first daughter, name means warm or day. And I picture a beautiful morning waking up, going outside, the sun is shining, the warmth beating in the face. The second daughter, kind of spice, and this spice is used for flavor. Getting more flavor in life, experiencing the flavor of bitterness, recover the bitterness of what he's going through. And then the third daughter, meaning a cosmetic container, covering up the brokenness, the ugliness of his suffering. So it says, in essence, these 3 names, these 3 daughters, effectively convey the abundance of Job's restoration. And instead of replacing his deceased children, God blessed Job with 3 of the most beautiful daughters in the land. And God doubled Job's possessions. And you might think, God could not restore Job to his former state. But I think he did, and he did. But he gave more. And I know you might think that, so does that mean that if I'm going through suffering, God will give you more? I think so. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. So Job may have expressed his joy in his newfound blessing by naming his daughters for a specific reason. And these 3 names is Job's personal testimony of that warmth, that perfume, that flavor, that fruit, that beautifulness that covered the ugliness of suffering. that filled his soul once again. At first look, getting back property, wealth, and children seems like proof of divine payback, which is what Job's friends were telling him. And I see Job, this innocent man who's been serving time in prison, and he gets compensation for his mistake. Maybe that's what we see. But this restoration was not a reward of payment. And if you look at the text, it has nothing to talk about how God's action was a reward or compensation for Job's suffering. Despite that possibility. But I see it more like machine shop. When they sort of heat treat metal. So the process way to do is the metal is heated, it gets hot and turns white. And on top of the white hot liquid, develop this slag. And the impurity previously trapped in the metal is released from the heat. And now I look at that. It's really sort of an image of the heat of suffering. How the workers come to remove all that slag, making the metal pure as possible. And I see that adversity unlocks the things in our lives that only intense heat of suffering can release from us, so that we can be more Christ-like, to be more sanctified. And God always has a purpose, even though we might not know it. We conclude in verses 16, 17 with summary. Job lived an additional 140 years. His great trial of suffering is over. He's blessed by seeing all his children, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren, 4 generations. And then the book ends. Then Job died, old and full of days. So it's very important to note that God restored Job's relationship before blessing him. Because back in verse 5 of chapter 42, Job cried out, "Now my eyes see you," before he was blessed. So Job's act of bowing down to God during this painful time proves his genuine faith. It's not that God first blesses him and then Job says, "You seem to be a good God after all, so I'll worship you." He doesn't do that. His worship is directed towards God just because of who he is. As a result, he receives blessings in the end. And there's no proof or assurance that he'll be blessed when he worships. He lives by faith, not by sight. And the blessing isn't given as a reward for worship. It's not that God said, "Good job, Job. You endured very well. Now you have the blessings I promised you." That's not what happened. His wealth doubled. God blessing Job, doubling all the blessings, is a show of grace. And we're challenged to never interpret Job's suffering in a way that diminishes God's grace. Even though God doesn't owe us anything, the most crucial aspect of blessing that arrives at the end. It's kind of interesting. Around the same time, 5 years ago, I was just flying back from Toronto. I was with my previous denomination, and I was going through the process, jumping through different hurdles, and I was jumping very well. Boom, 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 boom. And to be honest, there wasn't a lot of humility, because I kept on saying, "I am so good. Man, I'm good." It seemed very easy. But as a race, you always know that there are certain journeys along the race, the pathways that's a little bit more difficult. So there was a very big turn on that race. I need to fly Toronto. And the way this denomination works is they get all the candidates from all over Canada and they assemble them and they fly them to Toronto for a 1-week retreat where they pray, discern, and basically get to know the person before they're moving on to the next hurdle of the denominational race. I just finished my seminary education. I graduated in June. And my prospect in the denomination was very, very good. However, there are certain things in the denomination that I wasn't comfortable with. There was theology, but more there was a lot of politics and ethics that didn't jive with me. So I was struggling. What should I do? And I shared some of these concerns with other people in my circle of friends within that denomination. And within this denomination, every month, all the ministers or pastors in that denomination would assemble every month to come together for meetings. And it was a Tuesday. It was that Tuesday. And then what happened was, a very seasoned veteran within that denomination came up to me and says, you know, Bill, I know that you have some reservations about what's going on. And I also know that there's certain things that you see that you don't agree with. And I also know that there's certain things about the theology of the denomination that you're not comfortable with. And this day, I remember the statement. You know, Bill, if you go to the interview in Toronto, and if you answer what the committee wants to hear, and you do what you need to do, the denomination will look after you very well financially. I want you to think about that statement. Turn your back on your ethics. Turn your back on what is bothering you. And the church will look after you financially. And why was that statement hit me so hard? Because I was near the end of my journey. All the money that I saved up when I was a teacher went to my theological education. Plus, I was working in church, and you know, living in Vancouver on that salary, there's no way I could live a comfortable life. So basically, all through 5 years, we basically had to hold up the family financially. Plus, after graduating, it was time to repay. We paid the student loan. And it's kind of this joke that some people say that you have three people. One's a medical student, one's going into law, and one is a pastor going to seminary. The lawyer and the doctor is poor, the person going to seminary is rich, and when they come out, the doctor and the lawyer are rich, and the pastor is poor. Now, this question popped up, and I'm thinking, what should I do? I need to look after my family. In essence, the individual is asking me, or asking myself, do I want to stay warm and fed on the outside, but stay hungry and cold on the inside? So I went home and I said to Wendy, this is what someone asked me. If I go to Toronto and I blow my interview on purpose, would you not like that? When he says, you do what God has called you to do, and we let God take care of us. So God and I went to the retreat, knowing that I don't think this is going to work. 8 of us went through the whole process. 7 passed. Guess who failed? At the end of the evaluation, there's 3 boxes on the evaluation. In my translation is this: Go to a restaurant. We have a table for you. Second is, please wait at the bar and table's ready for you. We'll call you over. Or 3, the restaurant is booked. There's no room for you. So I got the third option, which means don't come back. So I got on a plane, flew back, when they picked me up, expecting to celebrate, because she knew that would probably kill the interview. If I really, because I knew what the answer, the problem is, I knew what the committee wanted, but I did not give what they wanted. So when he says, well, are we going to celebrate? Yeah, we're going to celebrate. Not celebrating that I'll progress into the denomination, but celebrate that I can have conviction. But you know what? Here's the thing. I felt like Job when I got off the plane. Not because I got off the plane with all these swords, but somehow I've never been in my life bitten by mosquito 40 places around the body. So I didn't have swords, but I had mosquito bites everywhere. And I still have those scars on my legs, which is a reminder of my journey. So I did feel a Job moment. But also I feel it's conviction. Now sometimes we're faced with this temptation, comfort. And we turn away from our conviction because we will be comfortable. And after that time, from that end of August to me coming here, there were a lot of difficult conversations with Winnie and Kairos. Things like saying that, sorry Kairos, but mommy and daddy cannot afford that. I mean, think about it. To a kid, they don't understand that. No means you don't love me. But here's the thing. I see, Job was blessed with double. I think, coming here, I'm blessed double. I just love serving at the circles. The people, everyone who's spoken into my life, all these conversations, it's great. I feel I've been doubled. And that's a blessing. I thought I wanted this, but God had more for me, and I reflect on, if all my buddies who are in that denomination right now, you're blessed. But unfortunately, some of them feel the same way as I do. Now, I'm not saying that I'm better than anyone, but I know that some of them have to hold their nose because, unfortunately, life's pressures is not that. It's hard. And as I was going on, flying back to the plane, and those times of meditating and going through devotionals and my quiet time with God, I'm just reminded of what what James says. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and that steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Lacking in nothing. Our faith is tested through suffering, which helps us develop what? Endurance. And this endurance leads to what? Spiritual maturity. And we learned that one of the purposes of our suffering is endurance and spiritual maturity, and Job talks about this. And then James, in fact, specifically mentions Job. James mentions Job in his connection with suffering. As an example of suffering and patience, brothers, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. Behold, we consider those blessed who remind steadfastness. You have heard of the steadfastness of Job, and you have seen the purpose of the Lord. How the Lord is compassionate and merciful. Do you believe that the Lord is compassionate and merciful? God allowed Job's suffering to prove Satan wrong, but also show Job's unwavering faith. And according to James, God's compassion and mercy towards Job during the suffering resulted in his eventual blessings. And John Calvin said this: affections ought ever to be estimated by their end. James teaches us that we should respond to our suffering with joy, faith, perseverance, hope, and caution. And the only time the New Testament names Job, it singles him out with what? Steadfastness, perseverance. In this way, I think he's like Christ when Christ endured suffering on the cross for us. And there's this important connection between Job and Christ that I see. The ultimate response to Job and Christ's followers is when we struggle with evil, we need to embrace it. Because Jesus accepted and bore its consequences. Job, being an innocent sufferer, is a companion of God. And I see the last chapter of Job, chapter 42, anticipate the return of the Lord Jesus Christ. And just like all the Old Testament characters that respond to Christ, they all die at the end of his story. His death shows he's not the one, just a glimpse of the real deal. Just as Job and the prophets and the John the Baptist would be able to untie Christ's sandals. And I believe that the new heaven and new earth will be rock solid and real. We look for today, beautiful. More beautiful than all the beautiful times that we go on mountain hikes and worship the beautiful morning. That would all seem so dull. We look for this beautifulness that makes the most abundant family blessings to bear. And we look for prosperity that's even better than anything we find on earth. And we look forward to celebration that will make the best part in the world seem like just casual gatherings. So, I close on the last chapter of Job. Let us remember that what we ought to expect as a normal Christian life. Let us see what Job has foreshadowed, now fulfilled in sufferings of faith, life, death, resurrection, ascension, and heavenly reigns of Jesus Christ. Job is the best, the greatest comeback story. But he had help. Just like Satan couldn't win alone, defeating him, we, all of us, need divine help. Our victory is guaranteed through Jesus Christ and the cross. Recalling when Jesus, in his suffering, his spiritual agony, he cried out, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" And what was God's response? To save them, I must break you, my beloved son. Could this be a glimpse of what Isaiah says in verse 5? We are healed by his wounds. The gospel writers informed us that after the resurrection, he appeared to disciples in the upper room. Only tangible evidence of the resurrected glorified Jesus were the scars on the cross. The book of Revelation informs us that Jesus is in heaven like a slaughtered lamb. Where there's a scar, there's healing. And that is how we should read Job, through the crimson lens of the cross. In Christ, God was reconciled the world to himself. The problem of suffering can only be solved by the suffering servant whose wounds we are healed. The Lord's mercy and compassion will be fully revealed when Jesus comes back. But the payoffs is the blessing we will see at the end. I think we are blessed frequently in our walk with Christ. God is so good to us, blessing us so many ways. But those blessings that we experience now, it's just a taste of the more to come. And the blessing at the end of each of our lives will be as real as those blessings. is what I've experienced so far. 5 years ago, leaving Toronto, coming here, and walking with all of you, and how you continue to bless me. May God continue to walk with you through your trials. Let us pray. Gracious God, sometimes we come in pain, broken, and in. But Lord, just as Job, we need to rely on the blessings that is coming, even though sometimes we don't see it. The Lord, give us hope, give us endurance to run the race. The endurance out on the ground with those pebbles, those sharp stones that hurt our feet. Even though those pain that we encounter on the road is hurtful. Lord, give us humility and the trust in you, Lord. And for those of us who are suffering, those of us who are broken, those of us who are at their end, saying, why, God, let me go? May our journey with Job continue to be with us on the good days, on the bad days, and the terrible days. Remind us what we need to do and how to be more like you, Lord. Grow to be more like your Son. Thank you, Lord, for your actions. I thank you, amen.